The Lawyer Who Rocks is brought to you by Hughes Media Law Group. You can visit us at hmlglaw.com. Keep up with the podcast on social media at hmlglaw on all major platforms and be sure to follow us there. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode of The Lawyer Who Rocks. My name is Jolene Winther Hughes. I am a lawyer who rocks.
When it comes to having your back, there ain't nobody better. This you better believe. Jolene, you know
When I first met Martine Charles, she was the communications director at Real Networks, and we worked tirelessly on launching the first digital paid content subscription services. Martine is an absolute genius as a communication strategist for brands you know and love, and she founded her own company, Mark Global Communications, almost 8 years ago. I'm so very excited to welcome the real-life Olivia Pope, my friend, Martine Charles.
I like that.
Welcome, Martine.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's great to be on this wonderful podcast with a lawyer who rocks.
Well, it has been so much fun reconnecting with you over the past couple of years. And before we delve into Mark Global, which is such a phenomenal company you've created, I want to learn how you got there. So let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
I am from Guilderland, New York, which is a little town near Albany, New York, that nobody knows. And it is part of the tri-state area, but I usually say I'm from New York and stop there.
Were you always social? Did you always love communications? Were you always a great communicator?
No, I didn't. I was on a path to be a doctor, not that I wanted to, but it was one of those paths that I come from a family of doctors and they were like, you're the eldest, so you're going to be a doctor. And that kind of didn't work out because I didn't like blood. I wasn't good at science or math. But what I did love was writing. And I read everything on the planet by everyone, whether it was history or Harlequin romances, whatever it was, but I read everything and just really loved it and loved the classics. And so that was one thing for me in terms of I could always write. That was my thing. So that's what inspired me, if you will, to say, okay, looking at what do I want to do? I wanted to write. And somehow the PR field and communications field requires a lot of writing. So I just fell in and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and helped me design a career.
I got a communications degree in advertising before I went to law school. Did you get a communications degree or did you get a different kind of degree?
Did not. I studied international relations. I studied French Lit, and I did not know that you could do anything in communications. But one of the things that happened was I was studying to take the Foreign Service exam, and a friend of mine owned the Miss Black America pageant. And she said, why don't you come up and work with me for a summer while you figure out what you want to do? And we are doing the pageant. So my job entailed sponsorship, press releases, sales, going to NATPE and selling the show. So it was really, really diverse and across the board. And I realized that this was something I could do. And then I decided I needed a real job. And so in looking for a real job, I found KYW News Radio was looking for a promotions coordinator. And I was half promotions coordinator and half engineering coordinator. And so that's how I got my first job in communications.
Well, how long did you work in radio?
I was at KYW for about 3 years, and then I decided to leave and pick up and go back home and ended up working for a small company at the time in Saratoga, which was Broadcast News Networks. It was fun. It was a bunch of 20-somethings working out of a barn in Saratoga and creating great television. I learned a lot about television there, like from the bottom up. I started off in PR and just, writing press releases about the stories and the shows that we were doing, landed us in the New York Times, actually, for a small company out of Saratoga that had never gotten a lot of press. It was kind of amazing and it was fun. And because it was such a small company, I got to do a lot of things, including traveling and pitching shows and programs that were picked up by WNBC in New York and national programs as well for a bunch of different networks.
How did you go from, Saratoga and doing these cool television programming to VP at VH1?
Well, there was a step there. I was at CNBC. So I was director of corporate communications over at CNBC. So that meant that I was doing more of the business end and telling the business stories. So with Maria Bartiromo, with Geraldo Rivera was there at the time, a bunch of really great people, the Squawk Box Show, all kinds of things. But I started off doing late night. It was an inverse kind of thing at CNBC because late night was actually a secondary market for them. The primary market was during the day because the markets are open during the day. So I started off doing a lot of the evening shows. From there, started working on the morning shows like the Squawk Boxes and the Power Lunch, etc. And then from there, I think I just got a phone call, and VH1 was looking for someone to come in and work in the corporate communications for MTV Networks overall. And I like to say that I always somehow end up at the right place, but I went to MTV Networks and was really excited about it and thought I had the job and I didn't. I didn't get it because they needed to move somebody internally. And so they were like, hey, it was great to meet you. It was Carol Robinson at the time. And she was like, great to meet you and would love to have had you, but we need to move somebody from internal to this position. So I was bummed. And then I waited and I was like, oh, I'm at CNBC. Everything is fine. But they called me. There was one person that I hadn't met, and it was a guy who was head of corporate communications for VH1. So he needed a VP. And Carol called me and said, hey, can you come in and meet with John? And I said, sure, I'll come in. And we hit it off. And so I got hired at VH1 and started there. And it was really funny because the culture is so totally different, right? Because I would be working at crazy hours at CNBC because people get, the bell rings at 9:30. So there's a whole lot of prep that goes before that. And we'd have mornings where we had interviews that started at like 5 or 6, or I had to get there by 5 or 6. So I was used to that early morning rush, rush, rush business news. And then I got to VH1 and people were coming in at like 9:30. And I was like, what is this? But it was a whole culture shift. It was a wonderful culture shift because it was an opportunity to actually impact culture and see how music impacts culture. And met everybody from Bono to Matchbox 20 to Christina Aguilera to Diana Ross through the various programs that we worked on and developed, as well as people that were just breaking out at the time, like John Mayer. We'd have these Friday afternoons where people would come and just play. John Mayer did a concert in the hallway. It was exciting, it was different. And we were doing behind the music, we were doing VH1 storytellers. So it really got good opportunity to be immersed in music and to be immersed in culture and to see how not just VH1, but MTV and Nickelodeon and all the various platforms that MTV Networks own really influenced different parts of the culture and told different stories to different people at different ages and pretty much had a hand in developing people from the kids in Nickelodeon to the people at VH1. So it was just really the impact of music and the impact of culture on developing individuals and developing and moving the culture forward, if you will.
Absolutely. And then, so from VH1, is that when you came over to Real Networks where we met?
Yes, I came to Real in Seattle, and I came on every day that I came, it didn't rain. And I was like, well, this is nice. I could do this. Real was right on the water, so that was fantastic as well. So I got there, and my first day on the job, everybody had given me umbrellas. I didn't bring them. The sky opened up, and I was drenched. And that was my introduction to Real, my first day on the job. And it was just a fascinating experience for me as well, because anyone will tell you that Martine is not a technology whiz. It was a great education in terms of being immersed in something that I probably wouldn't have selected for myself, except for the fact that Blair said television on the internet. It proved to be a really fascinating experience. And look where we are today, right? The opportunity to bring these shows from Brazil to Netflix now, right? We went from, okay, we're selling the real networks, we're selling the package and trying to get people to understand how they could put television on the internet and have a, without the buffering and, making it better and better. And we went from there to now people are streaming and people are watching whatever they want on their computers, on their phones, etc. So yeah, major shifts.
From news to then technology, what was the next phase of your career? You started Mark Global around 8 years ago, right?
I basically said, I don't know what I want to do next. And Real had offered me a wonderful opportunity and an opportunity to go to Europe and work from Europe. But there were some things that were going on personally that made me want to be closer to my family. I decided to move to California. And because California has great water, great beaches, and the sun, and I definitely love sun. And I sat there and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. So joined a couple of friends and started an agency and just worked with it, just started getting work, in terms of we worked with Sheila Johnson, who is starting line. She was married to Bob Johnson from BET. And I don't know if everybody knows who Sheila Johnson is, but she was the first Black billionaire before Oprah. And she was opening a number of hotels. And she was also doing some other work. So we represented her. She owned the Mystics at the time. So we represented her and her group of products and businesses. So did that as well as represented just a number of different people. But what was really exciting is we kind of fell into cycling and went from knowing nothing about cycling to representing some of the best in the world or the best in the world in cycling. So I could tell you that I actually read the book, It's Not About the Bike, Lance Armstrong, so that we could understand the ins and outs of cycling. And then in a ironic way, towards the end of our cycling career, we ended up managing or working with Tyler Hamilton, who, if you don't know, is one of the people who actually told the story of what happened with Lance Armstrong and the drug use, et cetera. So we managed that, did the 60 Minutes piece with Tyler that kind of started breaking the story about drug use and it got people to see that this actually did happen. It was really interesting. I learned a lot from that. And then from there, I started my agency on my own.
Well, let's talk about Mark Global because Mark Global's mission is to help brands define themselves by creating relevant, consistent messaging and identity. Why is that so important?
Because a lot of the people that I work with, they have not yet defined their brands or who they are or what their message is, their key messages, or they haven't defined their brand identity. So if you haven't defined what the brand is and if you haven't defined what your target audience is, a lot of times you can't reach everybody, right? And sometimes when you ask people, okay, who are you trying to reach? They'll say, oh, we're trying to reach everyone. This is for everyone. But no brand is really for everyone, right? You have to start somewhere. You have to start, okay, it's for the 25 to 34, or it's for the 18 through 24, or it's for the 55 plus. But you have to start somewhere and identify what your core audience is and target your messaging and your marketing to that core audience and then grow from there. And you can have different audiences, but you talk to audiences in different ways. And I think one of the big things about Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and the developing platforms is that people understand that there is a different way of talking to these audiences. So it kind of breaks down how you talk, what messages you send to whom, and how you get people to connect to you and to your brand.
I mean, what kind of clients do you work with these days?
We work with a number of different clients. We have a new emerging client, Roger, who's a singer. He does hip hop with gospel, gospel. So it's kind of interesting. So we're just trying to find our sea legs and help him find his sea legs there and find his audience. So we work on that. We also are working with a number of high profile artists, including Earth, Wind, and Fire. We work on their Music is Unity, which is their foundation. So we help run the foundation and do communication strategy about the foundation, which works with kids who have been in the foster care system or are aging out of the foster care system. So we work to support them and get the message out and get people working with us. I've worked with Common and Commons Foundation. We've worked with the ACLU and the Innocence Project. We work with COSBAC, who works with kids, African American, Hispanic kids, to make sure they do well in school and to give them the tools to do well in school and to also understand their history, if you will. So those are some of the people that we work with currently. And then also through some other platforms, we work with Washington Spirit, which is a soccer team in Washington, D.C. We also work with the CIAA as well through Liquid Soul, and just a number of clients across the board. So we stay busy, which is wonderful, but it's really working with people who are interesting and doing interesting things. So that keeps me motivated. Richard Louis just did the Sky Blossom film. I don't know if people have seen that, about caregivers and about just military caregivers, children who are taking care of their parents. And it's a fascinating movie. And he also just wrote a book. So we're representing him there as well. Enough About Me is the name of his book, which is fabulous. Tells, the tales of caregivers, really, and about taking care of his own dad, leaving MSNBC and NBC, giving a platform to really go out and take care of his dad, as his dad suffered from Alzheimer's. So that was really interesting. That's been really interesting. So it's a lot of work that is compelling.
One of the things that I wanted to talk with you about too, about just the cool things that you do. And I don't know that people really understand the work that goes behind some of the things you do. For instance, brand development and strategic communications, we talked a little bit about earlier. But, endorsements and partnerships and sponsorships, all the work that goes into that. I think that for those that don't work in this field, it feels like it just happens, right? But there's a lot of work that goes behind it. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and sort of how that comes to pass?
Right now, we're working with the Blank Slate Project. And the Blank Slate Project is a tour for a Better America. Hope for New America is the name of the tour. And it is built around a statue that was developed by Kwame Akoto-Bumfo, who is a Ghanaian artist. And the statue represents the whole African American experience and is an answer to the Confederate statues coming down, right? Kwame felt it was important to create a statue that showed everything, if you will, in terms of the African American experience. So at the bottom of the statue is a slave who looks remarkably like George Floyd, and he's in that same position. And there's a soldier, a Union soldier, who stands on his shoulders. And then this Union soldier is holding a flag, but also has a noose around his neck. And then there is a woman who is an activist who has the baby on her back, and the baby represents the future. The woman represents activism and obviously holds a slate. She holds a blank slate in her hands, hence the blank slate statue, which is interactive, and it's Wi-Fi enabled at the bottom. And people are able to write in the slate how they feel or what is going through their minds at the time. So our job was to bring the statue to the US and to create awareness about the statue. There's a whole lot of things that happen in the background, right? In terms of communication, figuring out what you want to communicate about the statue, what the key messages are, where the statue is going to be, who's going to see the statue. So part of what we did is to create an opportunity in each city where the statues were going to be. So we went to Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was killed, and told the story around that, right? And created a town hall around it. So that enabled us to get more people involved. And there's the press release writing, and then there's the calling and talking to press and explaining to them why this is important and why, if you're dealing with a ton of other stories that are happening that day. Why is this story important to you? And why is it important to your readers and your viewers? And why you should pay attention to this? So that's really the biggest part of the job. It's one of those things where I think I learned early on when I was first starting out. I went to the Washington Post and I went to visit a reporter and to pitch my story, tell him a little bit about who my clients were and why they should care. And when I walked into his office, and this was about television, and you create press kits, right? And you send information, you send press releases. When I walked into this man's office, top to bottom, floor to ceiling, were pitches, stories, press kits, media information from all over the country. So that showed me right there that to get my story and to get him to pay attention, you have to actually understand what you're talking about, and you have to find the element or the what is that piece or that piece of information that will make people interested in what you're saying and that will connect. And that's about it. It's about connecting. It's about connecting your story to the right person, connecting the story to the right audience, being able to use the tools of the trade, the press release, the media alerts, and over and beyond that, developing relationships that allow you to be able to go to somebody at MSNBC or somebody at the Today Show or somebody, a producer, and tell them what you're doing, showcase the person that you're working with or the property or the brand that you're working with in a way that galvanizes them to say, okay, this is something that my audience will care about. Everybody used to say, hey, can you get us on Oprah? It's like, no, dude, we're not going to be on Oprah, not until we have this type of information, or, we can always give it a whirl, but we'll try when we have the right information that will impact her audience and that she'll actually care about. So there's a lot of partnerships that one creates to advance the way the story is told and where the story is told and who's seeing it. And a lot of boots on the ground. And it's like sales, except what you're getting is a story. You're getting a story on the air. Your story runs instead about your client.
Well, part of why we reconnected is, luckily I'm now your lawyer, so it's a fun thing. But what is your favorite thing about running your business? I mean, you worked for a lot of really high profile businesses and now you run your own. What is your favorite thing about running your own business?
My favorite thing is working on the projects that I love and with people that I love working with and looking at different ideas and having ideas I'm able to try and things that I'm able to stand behind and say, okay, if we do this, and this, we can get your story out there and have people pay attention to what you're saying, right? So I am proud of being able to get blank slate in Times Square. So things like that, you can't put a value on it because it's really something that comes from the heart. It's something I really wanted to do. So that makes having my own company special because I would not be able to work on all of these various amazing and exciting things necessarily if I was working for a company.
Well, tell me this. What are you most excited about coming up?
I have an opportunity to work with the HBCUs and create something that is going to be long-standing and a legacy project. So I am working on that now, and I think it's going to be a really phenomenal project. So we're just starting to work on that. And what the other thing that I'm excited about, which you helped me with, Jolene, and I'm still working on, is the bridge, which is connecting brands to African American radio and radio programs and shows, and building from that to not just African American, but being able to reach Hispanic radio, et cetera. Because radio remains like one of the biggest platforms that people listen to and engage with and, love. So going back to square one, I guess. So I started in radio, I'm going back.
Well, to me, you've always epitomized badass. We'd need the whole day to talk about all the cool things that you've worked on. But because you're such a pioneer in digital strategy and you're such a beacon of light for so many top brands, you are also one of the smartest and kindest and most professional people I've ever worked with. And so, for all of those reasons, I think you are a badass. And I would love to know why you think you're a badass.
I think what makes me badass is that I refuse to stay in the box and I'm always thinking of the next thing to do. There's so many different opportunities out there and so many different ways to do something, right? To find a way to build something that's interesting and exciting to people. And I'll say my secret power is just really being able to find an idea, connect people together, get it to the next level, and bring it to fruition. And I think the communication skills come in handy in being able to paint the picture in a way that people understand and to make people feel good about a product or a project or the next big thing. That's my secret power.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to be on the podcast. I've been super excited to have you on, and you did not disappoint as I knew you wouldn't. So thank you so much, Martine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. And thank you so much for being my lawyer and being the lawyer who rocks because you really do rock.
Thank you for listening to The Lawyer Who Rocks. If you've enjoyed it and want to hear more from business badasses, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, please give us a review. It really helps us grow the show. The Lawyer Who Rocks is produced and edited by Sean Fox and HMLG. A big thank you to Aaron Jones for our theme music, to Jeff Gilbert at Hairball Media for our graphics, and a huge thanks to my entire team at HMLG. If you need a lawyer who rocks, find us at hmlglaw.com. On the next episode,
I didn't think that astronomy would have this sort of madcap Indiana Jones adventure feel. I didn't think that I would have a job like this.
This podcast has been brought to you by HMLG. If you need lawyers who rock, visit us on our website at hmlglaw.com and be sure to follow us on social media platforms at HMLG Law. You can also follow me on Instagram at The Lawyer Who Rocks. The Lawyer Who Rocks will be off next week, but we'll return the following week with a brand new episode. The Lawyer Who